There is a quality to human nature to view your childhood as normal, regardless of how abnormal in the grand scheme of human experience it is. When I was growing up, I didn't really question what I experienced in the way that I do now, and in a lot of ways, it's a pretty happy way to live. Growing up comes with a certain amount of disenchantment with your world as you move from the naivety of childhood and get hit with the cold realities of being an adult. We don't live in a perfect world, we live in this one, and this one sucks sometimes. E was a fun person to talk to, as she had a very acute sense of this. E had a childhood that was harder than it needed to be, largely because of policies and procedures that were tailor-made to best serve those that grew up with a very different normal than she did. Quote, "Growing up, my parents didn't have health care. I'm an immigrant, and my parents worked odd jobs that didn't provide health care, and we didn't have any idea about what Medicaid was. Whenever we got sick, you just stayed sick until you got better. So growing up, whenever we got hurt, we never really sought out care. When my parents got a job where insurance was provided, it was still hard. Just because you provide someone insurance, if you don't give them the resources to understand what it means, they still won't know how to use it. In my scenario when I was growing up, I was the one who was always making doctor's visits. I was the one at the clinics, filling out the information, playing translator, doing all the billing afterwards, etc., etc. And throughout all that time, nobody asked me if I needed a translator. Going to a doctor's office, doctors would talk to me as if I'm a full-grown adult. And mind you, this is in middle school. It was difficult because translating what my parents had to say to the doctor and then translating medical jargon back to my parents, a lot of things got lost in translation. Especially because I don't know medical jargon in general, and then to translate that into Korean? Whenever we left, my parents were always angry. They felt like they didn't get the care that they needed, and they were also upset with me because I wasn't able to translate well. But at the same time, it's not really my fault, and when that's your only avenue of getting care you need, you're really cut off. And I don't think a lot of people understand how large language plays as a barrier in healthcare." End quote. E is not exaggerating how massive a problem this is. Children should never be used as interpreters in medical situations for exactly the reasons that E talked about. It's inappropriate to expect a 13-year-old to understand something like the electroencephalogram shows an epileptiform wave pattern, let alone understand that in two languages and relate any questions that an adult might have with any kind of accuracy. Hospitals and clinics are required to provide interpretation for those who do not speak English or don't speak it well. It's important to note that these professionals have to undergo testing to prove that they understand both languages and can translate accurately. Even in the case if a family member does have a good command of both languages and is willing to interpret, there is a question of potential HIPAA concerns. In a nutshell, it's a law that protects the confidentiality of medical information. Think, would a man want their daughter to know about the struggles they're having with difficult urination or sexual dysfunction if they weren't required to have her in the room due to the language barrier? Let's just be clear, this issue is more complicated than the interpreters aren't being used. Interpreter services can also be a mess. They are completely invaluable services in a hospital, but they are fraught with headaches. In-person interpreters are by far the best and very difficult to come by, even for common languages like Spanish, and the problems go far beyond availability. If you're familiar with English and the way it's spoken in the American South versus Northwest versus England, then you know that dialect matters. Grab the box of biscuits out of the boot is a completely unintelligible sentence to many Americans, yet it is as plain English as grab the box of cookies out of the car trunk. Additionally, a great many healthcare workers can attest to the frustration of trying to explain a paragraph of instruction to a patient only for the interpreter to say 3 words as a translation. There is still a problem with all interpreters in that there is a middleman in the communication, be it family, a trained professional, or anyone else, that there is someone between the doctor and the patient mediating the formation of a relationship. Phone interpretation services are also highly valuable tools, but are just as frustrating, if not more so, to use. They have a much greater variety of languages available and can be reached anywhere there is phone service, but this is about the extent of positive things I can say about them. All the problems with in-person interpreters hold true here. Even accessing the right language, as the service needs to have somebody who speaks the language, who is working, and not on another call when you phone in. Throw in that there's no body language to read and a sticky phone connection, and I've spent way too many nights beating my head into the wall trying to get the most basic information from equally frustrated patients. So what's the solution here? I mean, there really isn't one. People with a lot more free time than medical providers would be well out of their depth trying to learn all the languages in the world well enough to effectively interpret medical jargon. We have to work with the resources we're given, and in this situation, we aren't given a whole lot. E was able to shine some light on another service that makes patients' lives far too difficult: insurance and billing. Quote, "My experiences with the insurance world were always awful because they treated me like I was stupid. When they would talk to my parents, they wouldn't give them the respect that you would give someone who is a native-born speaker. A lot of the times they would, I don't want to call them liars or anything like that, but it's just like they wouldn't explain things to my parents in a way that was easily understandable, or provide a translator. We've had a lot of bills and things moved to collections because it wasn't a helpful environment. Already not having enough money, and then the stress of having your bills move over to collections and the interest that's put on that, and then having to talk to these collection companies when it's already hard. It's just a lot of work that my parents didn't have time to do." End quote. Again, this is what institutionalized racism looks like. Nobody isn't trying to intentionally or vindictively make their lives difficult, but the systems are set up to be more difficult for people with harder jobs, less money, and lower English proficiency. People who already have a harder life are targeted for more difficulties because they lack resources. And it doesn't stop there. Another truth that doesn't get talked about nearly as much as it should is the microaggressions faced by people of color who work in medicine or pursue medical education and training. The sad reality faced by many students is that by choosing medicine, they're choosing to put up with tokenism, backhanded compliments, and a constant belittling of their achievements. E explains, quote, "I also volunteer at hospitals, and I would get a lot of microaggressions sent my way. Every single day, somebody asked me, 'Where are you from?' And I would say, 'I'm from here in Colorado.' And they're like, 'Where are your parents from? Where are you originally from?' And I'm like, 'Can y'all stop?' One time I was wheeling this patient out of the hospital, and he kept asking me where I was from, where I was originally from. And finally I said Korea, and he goes, 'Oh yeah, Korean people, they do these great mission trips, and there are so many Christians there in Korea, and then they do all these,' and I was just like, you are talking to the wrong Asian. It's a really weird position to be put in because personal me wants to be like, stop talking. You're being really rude. Stop talking to me. You don't know my background or anything, and I don't care that you know so many missionaries that come from Korea. I just don't give a crap. But at the same time, I'm a volunteer, and I need to be professional and not get upset. And I feel like that's what I've experienced a lot. Just through life in general, as a person of color, you're put in all of these positions and you face all of these microaggressions and overt forms of racism, but because of my position in life, compared to teachers or doctors, there's not a good way to combat the racism that we get. Then you look at the people who are in power, so in this case, doctors, but they don't make an effort to help people, which is crazy because you're a doctor. You decided to go into the medical field to help people. Did you assume that you're just going to be treating a homogenous group of people? I don't know if you've noticed, but people don't all come from the same situations as you. You need to understand how all of these things come into play. And when people say, "Oh, we've come so far, and it's like, have we though? You can't say, "Oh, it's gotten better," until it's fixed. It's a continuous thing that you have to work towards. A lot of people ask me to read their diversity essays, and then they would complain, like they're asking for all these things and how I'm diverse, etc., etc. And I'm like, you guys were telling me that you wanted to be doctors since you went to college. You know that diversity essays are a part of your application. Why didn't you do something and stick with it so you could at least put it on your resume? And somebody actually told me, "At least you've got things to talk about." And I'm like, yes, I'm so happy that I'm oppressed and can talk about these things on my application. People would also tell me that, Asians are not the minority of the minority that get into med school, so that doesn't really work for you. And I'm like, yes, because I'm just an Asian. I'm not all these other things in life that make me a well-rounded person. It's not like it's oppression competition, end quote. E went on to talk about the depersonalization put onto her accomplishments in education. It's a story that I knew too well because it so strongly echoed my own. Failure is not a luxury that many people of color feel that they have, especially when working towards advanced degrees like medicine. If you fail, it's because people like you, people from your background, people of your ethnicity, can't do it. As a first-generation student, you're also saddled with the weight of your family's expectations. You're the good one, the one everyone knew was always going to be successful. While as a fish out of water, you're constantly trying to justify your existence and prove your worth sitting at the same table as your classmates. Now, you might be inclined to think that at least you get credit for being a good student, right? No, not really. Even when you ace every test, pass every class, plenty will still make the case that you aren't there because you earned it. You're there because affirmative action gave you a more deserving white kid's spot. And it's beyond frustrating to deal with, and an argument I've had to have way too many times. And Eve told me about having these arguments herself. Quote, I work 3 jobs. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA. You had your parents' money and you went with C's get degrees. Please, it was not affirmative action that got me into school. You just didn't match up, and that's a you problem, not a minorities are taking my space problem. End quote. I wish it was an exaggeration how often this comes up. Parents and students whining that they didn't get accepted into whatever program because minorities stole their spot, as though the school gave their reservation away. Sure, you had a 2.75 GPA and scored in the 40th percentile on your MCAT, but yeah, it was definitely a person of color who stole your spot. Can I just take a moment to tell you all about the kind of deep down, rib-cracking, hearty laugh I got when the college admissions bribery scandal broke? I have had to listen to spoiled white kids complain when they fell short of programs that they didn't deserve to get into, that minorities stole their spot. And here is a story about spoiled white kids who actually stole spots. Make no mistake, the next time somebody tries to say I stole their kid's spot, I'm going to inform them that Aunt Becky stole your spot, and it is going to feel so good. On a more serious note, however, this is a very difficult struggle for a lot of students. In medical school, it's very common for students of all backgrounds to have what is called imposter syndrome. The feeling that they don't belong there, that they didn't deserve to be there, that sense that there was some kind of mistake and you're not as smart as the rest of your class and shouldn't have been allowed in. This is partially a factor of going from being the cream of the crop, best and brightest of their respective undergrads, and now being in a school with all the other Hermione Grangers of the world and suddenly not being that special. For minority students, though, this is complicated by others informing you that you really don't deserve to be there, that you only got in because you're a minority, and they let you in over more qualified people to up their diversity statistics. This is not true at all. Everyone who gets accepted to medical school got accepted because they are the Hermione Granger of their undergrad, regardless of color, and fought tooth and nail to earn their spot. But the stigma remains. Although, hopefully now people will think twice before accusing people of color when Aunt Becky was just arrested for actually stealing spots. I can't get over that. I will never let it die. He went on to talk about her own discussions with peers on the matter. Quote, a lot of people I work with say, how are your experiences in the healthcare system? What was it like? Don't you hate it when people say this or that to you? And it's just like, yes, I do, but I don't speak for everyone. So then, because people ask me these things, I think maybe they want to have a conversation. So we start conversations. And somebody literally told me, I feel attacked. And I said, this is not about you. I'm not even talking about you. You feel attacked. You wanted to have this conversation with me, and now that I'm being real with you about what marginalized people actually face, you feel attacked? At the end of the day, yes, you feel attacked, but what you feel attacked for will never amount to the amount of racism that people of marginalized groups face on a daily basis, because you don't go through that systemic oppression. You're uncomfortable because you know it's true, and you know you're part of the problem. So instead of getting defensive, think about what can I do to further learning about people outside my own group. End quote. I really can't phrase it any better than that. To be clear, I'm not saying all this to scare anybody out of applying to medical school. So many of the discrimination problems that happen are born from the diversity problem that still exists. Doctors treat people of all colors and all walks of life, and that is a lot more difficult if you've only been exposed to people with experiences like yours. Good intentions can only get you so far. We need people from diverse backgrounds in the medical field. We need different voices heard and new ideas to make medicine a better service and more inclusive and a healthier system for everybody. At the end of the day, we need to speak up. I want to thank my preceptor, Janet Meredith, C-STAR, 2040 Partners for Health, and the Colorado School of Public Health for sponsoring this project. A big thank you to Dr. Kyle Leggett and Dr. Jessica Jha for providing guidance and feedback on the medical aspects of these cases. I could not have done this without the two of you. A final thank you to the amazing people who volunteered their time and allowed me to tell their stories. I have learned so much from you about what kind of doctor I should be striving to become.